both good.
I'm sure it will.
Feel mighty good this morning, don't you?
I always feel good, Grandpa.
Here's your coffee.
Thank you. You know something? I'm very fond of you.
I kind of guessed that. Tell me now, what happened?
Happened?
Ain't too often I hear you humming. And when you do, something happened.
You know me too well. Sometimes I think you know me better than Chris does.
I think I do.
I have some very interesting information. Your great-grandson and his mother are going to have Thanksgiving dinner with us.
Did you ask, Lisa?
No. Bob did.
Bob? When did you hear this?
He told me last night after he came home.
I must say, I'm surprised.
Well, frankly, I was a little suspicious.
Of what?
Oh, Grandpa, there has to be a reason why Bob asked Lisa, because this is the first time he's invited her here or anywhere else, as a matter of fact, since they've been divorced.
Did you ask him why he invited her?
He said something about not wanting her to have Thanksgiving dinner alone. He didn't think it was right.
It was real nice of the boy.
And I thought about it, and I gave it a great deal of thought, Grandpa.
The press says that the wounds for President Kennedy perhaps could be fatal. Repeating, a bulletin from CBS News, President Kennedy has been shot by a would-be assassin in Dallas, Texas. Stay tuned to CBS News for further details.
It takes more than an instant to make a real cup of coffee. That's why Nescafe has come up with a new kind of coffee. It's more than an instant. It's new Minute Brew Nescafe. Anybody can make a coffee more instant, but Nescafe makes it more coffee, a new kind of coffee. Minute Brew. Minute Brew Nescafe is a new discovery, a new way to hold in extra rich flavor. So please help us. Let it brew in the cup a few seconds longer for all that extra flavor to come out. In other words, with Minute Brew Nescafe, it takes a little longer, but you get a lot more coffee. If you agree it takes more than an instant to make a real cup of coffee, buy this completely new kind of coffee today. New Minute Brew Nescafe. It's more than an instant, yet costs no more. New Minute Brew Nescafe.
The first portion of this program has been brought to you by New Soft Fabric Softener. New Soft renews the softness detergents wash away, another famous product of Best Foods. We'll continue with As the World Turns following station identification.
Follow Todd and Link to a mountain adventure with a pretty girl on Route 66 tonight on the CBS television network.
And now...
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. Further details on an assassination attempt against President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. President Kennedy was shot as he drove from Dallas Airport to downtown Dallas. Governor Connolly of Texas in the car with him was also shot. It is reported that 3 bullets rang out. A Secret Service man was heard to shout from the car, "He's dead." Whether he referred to President Kennedy or not is not yet known. The president, cradled in the arms of his wife, Mrs. Kennedy, was carried to an ambulance, and the car rushed to Parkland Hospital outside Dallas. The president was taken to an emergency room in the hospital. Other White House officials were in doubt in the corridors of the hospital as to the condition of President Kennedy. Repeating this bulletin, President Kennedy shot while driving in an open car from the airport in Dallas, Texas to downtown Dallas. Recounting again the details of this incident, 3 shots were heard to ring out as Kennedy and Governor Connally and Mrs. Kennedy rode in the back seat of the open car. Immediately, a Secret Service man said he saw blood spurt from the president's head. He fell into the laps of Mrs. Kennedy, and Mrs. Kennedy shouted, "Oh, no." Governor Connally was seen to crumple also. The car sped on, the motorcade speeded up, rushed to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, where the president and Governor Connally were rushed to the emergency room. A Secret Service man was heard to say he's dead as the president was lifted from the rear of the White House touring car, the famous bubble top from Washington, and taken into the hospital. Reporters about 5 car lengths behind the chief executive heard what sounded like that 3 bursts of gunfire. We will keep you advised as more details come in. The incident has taken place only in the last few minutes in Dallas. Stay tuned to CBS News for further details.
I've got a hunch. I don't know if I should say anything about it because I may not be right, but I have an idea that your sister's been pushing a few checkers around on the checkerboard.
Penny?
Yeah.
Are you saying you think that she had something to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
How could she have anything to do with it?
Well, Bob, what you don't know is that Penny has talked to me several times about trying to interest Neil into going back into medicine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, I'm sure you didn't. Well, I told Penny that if Neil was going to go back into medicine, that he'd have to do it on his own, without any push or pull from me or any other doctor, and not from her either, as a matter of fact.
But Dr. Keston...
She's talked to him, too. You see, Doug feels differently about Neil than I do. Why, I don't know.
And you think that Penny asked him to?
That'd be my hunch, yes.
I'm surprised. And yet I'm not. Must we get a menu?
Waiter?
I'd like to order. I'm kind of hungry.
Yeah, so am I.
We'll return to As the World Turns in just a moment.
I see you have a new family. Youngsters are such a big responsibility. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear about new Friskies puppy food, designed to meet the needs of growing puppies. Friskies is so nourishing. It has 15 added vitamins and minerals. All the protein puppies need to build strong bodies, sturdy bones, and sound teeth. And it has Friskies special beef flavoring. Go ahead, Mother. Help yourself. It's great for you, too. New Friskies puppy food in 2 sizes. Made by Carnation. They love dogs, too. Searching for a great new taste in dog food? Discover new Friskies Magic Sauce Cubes.
Here's a bulletin from CBS News. President Kennedy has been the victim of an assassin's bullets in Dallas, Texas. It is not known as yet whether the president survived the attack against him. The incident was this. The president, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connally of Texas driving in the president's famed bubble-top car from Dallas Airport to downtown Dallas, where the president was scheduled to make a speech. 3 bullet shots were heard to ring out. The president slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy. Witnesses said they saw blood streaming from his head. Governor Connally slumped into the bottom of the car. Bullet wounds were seen to be in his chest. The car itself rushed on as Mrs. Kennedy was heard to say, "Oh, no." It took him directly to a nearby hospital, the Parkland Hospital, where the President and Governor Connolly were taken into the emergency room, and witnesses there refused to comment on whether the President was still alive or not. As the bullets were heard to wing out of the assassin's gun, Secret Service men unlimbered their automatic rifles, but the damage, of course, by then had been done. As these details come in, let us read a few to you from the press service wires reaching us only now from Dallas. After these three loud bursts of gunshot, Dallas motorcycle officers escorting the President quickly leaped from their bikes and raced up a grassy hill. At the top of the hill, a man and woman appeared huddled on the ground. In the turmoil, it has been impossible so far to determine whether the Secret Service and Dallas police returned the gunfire that struck down Kennedy and Connolly, or whether this couple at the top of the hill, crouched down their inert forms as the police rushed them, were the would-be assassins. Stay tuned for further details from CBS News. We'll bring you details now, more details on the attempted assassination of President Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy was on her knees, we're told, on the floor of the rear seat of the car, her head toward the President, apparently leaning over and trying to converse with him. AP reporter who was with the group said that this man and woman we reported earlier were on a hilltop, were seen scrambling to the upper level of a walkway overlooking an underpass at which the car was approaching. Lawrence O'Brien, the presidential aide, says he has no information on whether the President is still alive. Mrs. Kennedy was weeping, trying to hold up her husband's head when the reporters reached the car as it dashed toward the hospital. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was in the car behind the President. There was no immediate sign that he was hurt. Repeating that, no indication Vice President Johnson was hurt. In fact, there was no evidence at all at what might have happened to Johnson, since only the President's car and its Secret Service follow-up car went on to the hospital. Let us recount this incident again. There has been an assassination attempt against the life of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. The President, Mrs. Kennedy, and Governor Connolly of Texas, en route from the Dallas airport to a speech the President was scheduled to make at noon in Dallas, were in the President's famed bubble-top car, driving through cheering crowds in the streets of Dallas when 3 shots rang out. The President slumped into the lap of Mrs. Kennedy, apparently a bullet wound in his head. Governor Connolly slumped to the floor of the car. Bullet wounds were seen in his chest. Mrs. Kennedy screamed out, "Oh no!" The car stopped momentarily. Secret Service men unloaded their rifles and started into the crowd. 2 persons, a man and a woman, were seen crouched with a crowd around them on a hilltop overlooking the road. Whether they were concerned in the shooting or not, we do not know yet. Secret Service men rushed to that scene and were waiting a report on that. Vice President Johnson was in the car immediately following President Kennedy and Governor Connolly. He was not hurt as far as we are able to determine. The President and Governor Connolly were rushed to a nearby hospital, Parkland Hospital, where they were taken into the emergency room, and we have no information yet as to how serious the injuries were. However, aides very close to President Kennedy had no comment when they were asked by reporters the seriousness of the President's injuries. Late information just in. Acting White House Secretary Malcolm Kilduff was asked whether the President was dead, and he said, "I have no word now." The President had landed just a short time before, as we said, at Dallas Love Field. He was driving to the Trade Mart in Dallas to deliver this luncheon speech, which was to be sponsored by 3 Dallas organizations. The largest turnout of the current Texas tour was on the streets to greet Kennedy. He was being greeted lavishly by the crowd in a very warm Texas welcome when the bullet fired out of the crowd. Stay tuned. We'll bring you the details just as quickly as they come in. It might be recalled that Dallas has been a hotbed of criticism of President Kennedy and his administration by outspoken rightist groups. Only 2 weeks ago, Ambassador Adlai Stevenson of the United Nations was in an incident in Dallas when he was besieged by pickets, far right-wing pickets, outside of a speech he made there, and he was struck in the head by a picket sign by an outraged conservative who felt we should not be in the United Nations. Even today, through Dallas, there were cars touring the streets with signs, U.S. or UN. A little late information. Rear Admiral George Berkeley, the United States Navy, the White House physician, rushed into that Parkland Hospital in Dallas. He headed for the emergency room where the President and Governor Connally were taken. We're still awaiting word as to the condition of the President from that emergency room. Governor Connally of Texas is the young governor who managed the campaigns of Lyndon Johnson over the last several senatorial and vice presidential campaigns of Johnson's. He is a leader of what is considered the more conservative wing of the Democratic Party in Texas. Part of the reason for President Kennedy's being in Texas was said was to try to patch up differences between the conservative and liberal wings of the Democratic Party, which it was believed endangered the chances of the administration taking Texas in the 1964 election. Let's recount again that President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas lie in the emergency room at Parkland Hospital in Dallas as an anxious world waits to learn how serious are the injuries that they suffered from an assassin's bullets. President Kennedy has been injured apparently in the head, Governor Connally of Texas in the chest. 3 bullet shots were heard to ring out as the president's car drove through the crowded streets of Dallas on the outskirts from the airport toward downtown. Further details now as we learn that the motorcade was so strung out as a result of the speedy Secret Service departure from the scene of the shooting that members of the Kennedy staff were from 15 minutes to a half hour behind in reaching the hospital. It was impossible, they tell us now, under the tension at the hospital to assemble any clear-cut story of the incident because the burst of gunfire, of course, took only seconds, and from there on out, confusion. Some of the Secret Service agents thought the gunfire, however, was from an automatic weapon fired to the right rear of the chief executive's car, possibly from a grassy knoll, and that's that knoll to which motorcycle policemen were seen racing and where the huddled figures of a man and a woman were seen on the ground with a crowd surrounding them, which suggests, of course, that perhaps this is where the shots came from. This we do not know as yet positively. A late bulletin. Representative Albert Thomas, the Democrat from Houston, Texas, says that he has been informed that President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas are still alive, or at least were still alive at the last word he had a few moments ago from Parkland Hospital. This is the first word we have had definitely from the emergency room, giving some hope that they survived this assassination attempt. The last assassination attempt against a president of the United States was that attack against President Truman when he was living at Blair House in Washington, and Puerto Rican nationalists charged the Blair House steps, attempted to enter Blair House. If this reporter's memory is correct, about 1951 that incident took place. They were cut down by Secret Service agents, but a Secret Service man died thwarting that attempt to enter Blair House. The President, Truman at the time, was only barely aware of what was going on. He, as a matter of fact, watched the incident from the upstairs windows after the shooting took place on Pennsylvania Avenue at Blair House. This incident recalls the incident at which Franklin Delano Roosevelt was an intended victim, and where Mayor Chermak of Chicago died in an assassination attempt in Florida, when President Roosevelt was on a tour, of course, many years ago. Recounting the episode again for you, President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas were shot as they were driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas. Assassins unknown as yet, their condition unknown. It is believed that President Kennedy was hit in the head, Governor Connally in the chest. We'll be back in 10 seconds to allow all our stations to identify themselves and to join the network. Crime Guide in our newsroom, and there has been an attempt, as perhaps you know now, on the life of President Kennedy. He was wounded in an automobile driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas, along with Governor Connally of Texas. They've been taken to Parkland Hospital there, where their condition is as yet unknown. We have not been told their condition. At Dallas, in the downtown hotel room, a group had been gathered to hear President Kennedy when he was waiting his arrival. Let's switch down there now, where Eddie Barker of KRLD is on the air. We're trying to get that connection to Dallas now. Just as soon as we can get Dallas on the air, you shall see the scene at the hotel, where we understand that the audience is just being told about the incident in their city, the shooting of President Kennedy and of Governor Connally. A word just in from Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth says that he understands that both President Kennedy and Governor Connally, while seriously wounded, are still alive.
Okay, go ahead, switch it.
This is
the safety precautions that were taken here at the Trade Mart, certainly among some of the most extensive that have ever been taken for the visit of anyone to this city. And as of this hour, it, of course, is all for naught due to the fact that there was an attempt made on the president's life. There had been earlier speculation that perhaps if there was any trouble, it would have come at the airport, where the president, if you were watching television and listening to the radio earlier this morning, you heard that he went up to the fence, went up to the crowd, and was mixing quite closely. He shook hands with many supporters. There was an air of congeniality on the part of the crowd. This Trade Mart is approximately 1.25 miles from the point where the attempted assassination took place. The Trade Mart, this huge market hall, is located just to the northwest of the downtown business area. The president's motorcade had taken him from the airport down Lemon Avenue, one of the familiar thoroughfares here in Dallas, to Turtle Creek, down past the Democratic County headquarters, and on into the downtown area. The procession came up Main Street, one of the three principal thoroughfares in downtown Dallas, and as it was just beginning to leave the downtown area and come out here to this hall when the attempted assassination took place. The announcement was made to the crowd just a few minutes ago as to what had transpired. No report on the condition of the president as yet. Yes, Dick.
There is an unconfirmed report, Eddie, that the president is in critical condition, that Governor Connolly has gone to the operating room. This is an unconfirmed report.
That the president is in critical condition and that Governor Connolly is now in the operating room. And also the fact that one of the Secret Service agents who was riding with the president was killed. Is that correct?
That is the report at this moment.
Dick, has there been any report as to whether or not the assassin was apprehended?
Nothing on the apprehension as yet. We still have that same street corner that you mentioned to go by. That's all so far.
Nothing other than the fact that at the intersection of Elm and Houston Streets, just west of the downtown area, is where the attempted assassination took place. There is a look of shocked disbelief on this crowd that has turned out for the president. Safety precautions here probably have never been greater. It was only a couple of weeks ago that an incident occurred here that caused some to think that it would have been better had President Kennedy not gone ahead with his announced plans of coming to Dallas. That was when the United Nations Ambassador Adlai Stevenson made a speech at the Memorial Theater in Dallas. You may recall that at that time there was quite a rhubarb inside the theater proper as Mr. Stevenson tried to speak. One man, a Frank McGehee, who is the leader of the National Indignation Convention, a group of extreme rightists here, tried to interrupt the ambassador. He was ejected from the hall. Then later, when Mr. Stevenson left the hall and tried to go to his car, he stepped away from his police protection for a minute and into the arms of a very hostile crowd. A woman hit him with a placard, and he was also spat upon by a 23-year-old Dalasite. This caused, of course, the fact that the precautions for the presidential visit went to extremes that have not been known here before. The report is that the attempted assassins, we now hear it was a man and a woman who fired the shots, were on the ledge of a building near the Houston Street underpass. Just from memory, that would...
That was a report from Eddie Barker at our affiliate KRLD in Dallas, Texas. The scene you saw was the luncheon to which President Kennedy was en route. He was planning to address that luncheon in one of his strongest statements yet against those who, as he said, would turn the clock back, but he did not get an opportunity to make that speech. He was cut down by bullets as his motorcade approached downtown Dallas. He is now in the emergency room of Parkland Hospital in Dallas. He is remaining in the emergency room because Secret Service aides say that the facilities there are as good as elsewhere. They have moved Governor Connolly, who was also cut down by those bullets, to the operating room at Parkland Hospital. Mrs. Kennedy, who was in the car with Governor Johnson and or Governor Connolly rather, and President Kennedy, was not injured but was said to be in a state of shock and is stunned. She was heard to cry out, "Oh no," as the bullets rang out, and the president slumped into her lap with, it is reported, a bullet wound in the head. Governor Connolly was shot apparently twice in the chest, although we do not have details of their injuries. As of 10 minutes ago, a White House aide said that the president was still alive. The extent of his injury, whether it is indeed critical or not, has not been officially confirmed by doctors from Parkland Hospital. Whether the assassin has been caught or not is not known as yet either. The early reports indicate, however, that a man was arrested by police and Secret Service agents. We're awaiting further details on that.
There's a picture for the motorcade wall. It's just before the incident.
Thank you, Don. This picture has just been transmitted by wire. It is a picture taken just a moment or two before the incident. If you can zoom in with that camera, we can get a closer look at this picture. You can see the president in an open car. The famed bubble top was not being used today. The president out in the open on a balmy Texas day. It had been raining earlier in Fort Worth when he made an appearance there to cheering crowds in a parking lot there. And earlier in the day, in this festive day, Mrs. Kennedy had made an appearance at a breakfast there, too, and was wildly cheered. You see the president here, a motorcycle policeman who undoubtedly was deeply involved in this matter before it was all over, immediately behind. And right over in here, you can perhaps see some of the Secret Service agents who were undoubtedly involved as well. They were not able to prevent the president being shot.
Back to Dallas. There are prayers now for the president.
We're now going into that Dallas luncheon the president had planned to address. Let's go back. Prayers, we understand, are underway.
When you get this thing back, the guard page queued up. It's an unidentified guy that said he was standing across the street. And he was...
The members of their family. So we pray that even in this gathering, that we may reveal that calm that shall be pleasing to thee, and that we shall await words in a spirit of prayer in thy holy name. Amen.
That was the Reverend Luther Holcomb, who is the Executive Secretary of the Dallas Council of Churches, and who was to have given the invocation here for the President's address today. As you can imagine, there are many stories that are coming in now as to the actual condition of the President. One is that he is dead. This cannot be confirmed. Another is that Governor Connally is in the operating room. This we have not confirmed. Another is, and apparently this is correct, that one of the Secret Service agents whose job it was to guard the life of the president was killed in his line of duty. The president was whisked from the scene of the attempted assassination, or assassination depending upon his condition, of course, at this hour, by bus to Parkland Hospital, which is located about 1.5 miles from this site, which would make it about 3 miles from the site of the shooting. It is a city-county hospital here, and the president undoubtedly is in the emergency room at that hospital, which would be on the first floor of Parkland. No word as yet. We are awaiting something more official. It is, of course, difficult, certainly, to go on scanty reports of something like this. This is the first time that the life of a president has been taken, or possibly taken, in some time. Am I too close? Of course, the time in the House of Representatives when the Congress was shot up for a while. As my memory serves me, I think there have been 3 assassinations in the history of presidents. President Lincoln, of course, President Garfield, and President McKinley, the 3 who have died by the hand of an assassin while in office. The crowd now beginning to get up and leave, most of them, of course, unsure, as we are at this time, as to just...
That was Eddie Barker at our affiliate KRLD in Dallas, Texas. This is Walter Cronkite back at the CBS newsroom in New York. We have just been advised from Dallas that blood transfusions are being given to President Kennedy. However, 2 priests have been called for and have entered the emergency room at Parkland Hospital, where he rests after the assassination attempt, which now was about a half hour ago. Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally are stunned, but they are at the bedsides of their husbands at Parkland Hospital. As we told you, President Kennedy lies in the emergency room. Governor Connally of Texas, also shot, has been taken to the operating room. Members of the White House staff have gathered in the waiting room at Parkland Hospital in the buff-walled hallways there. They're standing around now waiting for the word from the room. There was a report that a person had been arrested in this assassination attempt, and KRLD in Dallas did get an audio tape, did an interview, that is, with a man who said he saw the arrest. Let's listen to some of that interview.
Story building.
And as I told you earlier, a youngster said that he saw a colored man fire 3 times from the window of that building. I was in a car in the presidential caravan, about 7 cars behind the president's car. As we made the turn here at the intersection of Elm and Houston, I heard first a loud report. It sounded to me like a giant firecracker. Then in quick succession, 2 more. Immediately in front of me, I saw people begin to fall on the grass and run for bushes in a park area here. Then police officers ran on the scene, and there was a wild general search throughout this entire neighborhood. Finally, one of the officers found a small colored boy who said that he saw a man fire from about the 4th floor window of the school book depository building. Now, a white man only has been escorted from the building. The fire department had earlier come upon the scene with gear, and there was a room-to-room search of this building, which has 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 floors. The building right across the street diagonally from the Dallas County Courthouse. So evidently, the men the officers were looking for, or perhaps one of them, has been taken from the building, but now I see police officers running back toward the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository building, and evidently they are going to continue searching in that building for the would-be assassin of the president. This is Jim Underwood in Dallas. Back to CBS News.
In New York, the New York Stock...
Yes.
This afternoon, that's 5 minutes ago, after the market took a violent downturn at the news of the assassination attempt against President Kennedy. Let us recall for you now what has transpired in this...
KRLD is reporting they've been told by somebody in the hospital the president's dead. Only a rumor, but they've been told that. KRLD is saying.
Well, that's a repeat of something that you heard reported to you directly a moment ago from KRLD television in Dallas, and that is the rumor that has reached them at the hotel that the president is dead. Totally unconfirmed, apparently, as yet. However, let's go back to KRLD in Dallas.
Operating room, we do not know what his condition is, but the report is that the president is dead. This is not confirmed. This is something that, this is something that the word just came to us a minute ago. The word we have is that President Kennedy is dead. This we do not know for a fact. The word we have is that he is dead, that he was shot by an assassin at the intersection of Elm and Houston Streets, just as he was going into the underpass. The word we have is from a doctor on the staff of Parkland Hospital who says that it is true. He was in tears when he told me just a moment ago. This is still not officially confirmed, but as I say, the source would normally be a good one. President Kennedy on his second visit to Texas. The first time he came here, actually the third time. I remember he came here when he was a senator from Massachusetts a few years ago, and I recall the time he came into the airport here, and there was no one on hand to meet him. He was not as well known then as he is now, and an airline's public relations man took him into town. He was here to address a convention, and no one was on hand to greet him, so the president rode in with a PR man from an airline. The next time he came, he was the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. That was in 1960. The crowds turned out for him then. This is, of course, an area where there has been a tremendous amount of dissension in the ranks of the Democratic Party. It is an area where there has been, of course, a tremendous amount of feuding on the part of a group that considers itself to be the extreme right wing. As to the visit this time, after Adlai Stevenson, our ambassador to the United Nations, ran into problems, he was spat upon by one man, he was hit in the head with a placard by a lady. The talk was that the president should not make this trip. However, it was decided that the security precautions were such that he could make it without any problems. And now, the word that we have is that the President of the United States is dead. Dead at the hands of an assassin's bullet. The word is that it was a 25-year-old man that he shot from a window in a building that I can best describe as being a factory loft. It houses school books near the edge of the downtown Dallas area. It's just across the street, catty-cornered from the county jail, ironically enough. The shots apparently were fired as the motorcade started to go under the triple underpass. If you have been in Dallas, you may be familiar with the triple underpass. It's where three of the main streets come together at the west end of the business district and there funnel under the railroad tracks that feed into the Union Terminal. The motorcade was to have gone from there on to this Trade Mart where we are now. A Trade Mart that is fast emptying of people, little clusters crowded around. Most of these people are the civic and business leaders of the community. The man who made the announcement a moment ago that the president had been shot. Well, now, here is Luther Holcomb, the Dallas Council of Churches Executive Secretary at the podium. Here is Dr. Holcomb. His microphones have apparently not been turned on. The word that we have is that the president is dead. Perhaps this is official now, and this is the word that will come from Holcomb. He gets to the podium. He's at the podium, and he gets an opportunity to speak. Also joining it is official. The President of the United States has been assassinated in Dallas, Texas. He fell victim of an assassin's bullet just as his motorcade went to go into the underpass just west of the downtown area that would lead him to this site that had been prepared for his luncheon. Now to the podium.
We do want to commend the spirit that has prevailed as each of you is visiting one with another. As we conclude this meeting, as I have said before, we're all stunned, we're speechless. I do want to ask Dr. William H. Dickinson, Jr., longtime servant of God, pastor of Highland Park Methodist Church, to say just a word and then to pronounce the benediction.
There are no words to express what we're feeling. We are all conscious of the fact that we face an issue and some responsibilities as citizens today which we cannot face without the strength and the wisdom and the patience of our God. Will you bow your heads? Draw near us, O God, and sustain us with thy presence, and grant unto us wisdom, strength, courage, to live in keeping with thy law, and to live as free men. Amen.
Dr. Dickinson, the pastor of one of the largest Methodist congregations in the world. The word was not given to the crowd, but we understand that the president is dead. This we do not have an absolute confirmation on, but this is the word that we have. As we said a few minutes ago, he apparently died in the operating room at Parkland Hospital, which is the city-county emergency hospital here, located about 1.5 miles from this building. The president and his party have been in Texas now since yesterday. They arrived in San Antonio, then to Houston, then to Fort Worth last night. He walked into a big crowd of some 6,000 to 8,000 this morning in a parking lot in downtown Fort Worth. The fears here were that had the president had a problem in Dallas, it would have been at the airport upon his arrival. But
that was Eddie Barker at our affiliate KRLD in Dallas, Texas, speaking from the room where President Kennedy had been scheduled to make an address to 3 Dallas organizations, but an assassin's bullets cut him down on the way to that meeting from the airport. Here is what happened this morning just an hour ago. It has been 1 hour since that electrifying flash came over the wires that bullet shots had been heard to ring out in the Kennedy motorcade. President Kennedy arrived at Dallas Airport from Fort Worth, Texas. It was the third stop on his swing of Texas that began yesterday, a swing that up to then had been wildly greeted by thousands of Texans. He had been given a warm Texas welcome. He arrived at the airport and with Mrs. Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas climbed into an open limousine to drive through streets crowded with cheering Texans. About two-thirds of the way to the downtown hotel where he was scheduled to make a speech. As his car approached a railroad underpass, 3 shots were heard to ring out. Mrs. Kennedy was heard by reporters nearby to scream, "Oh no!" The president, blood gushing from a wound in the head, slumped into her lap. Governor Connally slumped onto the floor of the limousine. It was later determined that he had wounds in the chest. We also have just heard that perhaps Vice President Johnson was wounded in the arm in this incident. He was seen entering the hospital, at least, holding his arm, and has not been seen in the corridors of the hospital with the waiting White House aides since. At any rate, after that shooting incident, of course, pandemonium broke out. The Secret Service men, well trained in their job, immediately began fanning out into the crowd looking for the assassin. A report has it that the man has been arrested, that he was operating from a second-floor window, oddly enough, cat-a-corner from the county jail, fired from that window almost down into the limousine, like it is said, shooting fish in a barrel. The limousine speeded up then and was used under police escort, of course, to rush the president to a nearby hospital, Parkland Hospital. He and Governor Connally were taken into the emergency room of the hospital. Shortly afterwards, Governor Connally was removed from that room and taken to the operating room of the hospital. The president left in the emergency room because aides said that the facilities there were quite adequate. The president's own physician rushed into the room shortly after that. He was on the tour with the president. Pints of blood have been rushed into the room for transfusion purposes, and 2 priests were called to the room. There is the report in Dallas, you heard from our affiliate there, Eddie Barker, that the president is dead, but that has not been confirmed by any other source. And as late as 15 minutes ago, it was reported by aides outside in the corridor that he was still alive. The extent of his injuries, whether they are indeed critical or not, is not known either. It was just an hour ago that the incident took place. We have just learned, however, that Father Huber, one of the 2 priests called into the room, has administered the last sacrament of the church to President Kennedy. Regarding the probable assassin, the sheriff's officers have taken a young man into custody at the scene, a man 25 years old. We just have a report from our correspondent Dan Rather in Dallas that he has confirmed that President Kennedy is dead. There is still no official confirmation of this, however. It's a report from our correspondent, Dan Rather, in Dallas, Texas. Vice President Lyndon Johnson, as we said, has not been seen in the corridors of the Parkland Hospital. He was said to be, by some, to perhaps have been slightly wounded in the arm. He was seen going into the hospital holding his arm at any rate. Mrs. Lyndon Johnson says that the vice president, though we just have this information, is fine. Mrs. Lyndon Johnson was taken back into another first-floor room where Johnson originally had gone and asked if her husband had been wounded. She has replied negatively. Secret Service operators then took her away, and there were no more questions permitted. The vice president is on the scene. If, as Dan Rather reports, it turns out that President Kennedy has been assassinated, is dead from the injuries suffered an hour ago in Dallas, Texas. We have no further information on the condition of Governor John Connally of Texas, who was shot in the chest by this assassin's bullets. He was taken to another room of the hospital, and no further information on him so far. Mrs. Kennedy was in the car, as we said, with President Kennedy. He slumped into her lap, and she is said to be bearing up reasonably well. Stunned, but not in a state of shock as yet, she was seen crying in the corridors of the hospital. Bill Stinson, an assistant to Governor Connally, says he talked to the governor in the hospital operating room. He says the governor was shot just below the shoulder blade in the back. Stinson said he asked Connally how it happened, and he said, "I don't know, I guess from the back. They got the president too." Stinson said that he asked Connally if there was anything he could do, and Connally replied, "Just take care of Nellie for me." Nellie is Governor Connally's wife. Governor Connally could very possibly have been shot in the back with the assassin's bullets still coming from the front of the car. He rode in a small jump seat in the center of the back of the specially built presidential limousine, specially built for such public performances such as this. As a matter of fact, the car is so built that the president sits higher than he would in a normal automobile, so that the crowd can get a good look at him. But, as it turned out today, so that an assassin can also get a good shot at him. Further information here. The Catholic priest who helped perform the last rites, Father Huber, Dallas, said that he did not believe the president was dead at that time. The priest left the emergency operating room at Parkland Hospital and walked out of the hospital. There has been, just a moment, that information does not bear directly on the condition of President Kennedy. It comes from Kansas City, Missouri, where our affiliate KCMO says that Mrs. Bess Truman has told KCMO that former President Truman is too upset to comment on today's tragic developments. As we said, there has been no word at all on the official word from the doctors at Parkland Hospital or the White House staff on the extent of the president's wounds. Mrs. Kennedy is in the hospital, as we said. So is Mrs. Connally, the governor's wife, as are indeed most members of the White House staff. He was carrying a large staff with him on this tour to Texas. It is believed that a gap in the motorcade perhaps saved Vice President Johnson from being a target of the assassin today. The gap had opened up in the motorcade just before the assassin's bullets rang out. The priest who were with Kennedy, the two priests who were with Kennedy, say that he is dead of his bullet wounds. That seems to be about as close to official as we can get at this time. They did see the president just a few moments ago, and this is the bulletin that has just cleared from Dallas, that the two priests who were in the emergency room where President Kennedy lay after being taken from the Dallas street corner where he was shot say that he is dead. Our man Dan Rather in Dallas reported that about 10 minutes ago, too.
No, I'm lying down there, Walter. This is the picture under it, right there.
There's another picture taken just moments, split moments before the assassination attempt is here. Let's see if we can get a real close-up of that picture. It has just arrived. It shows the smiling Mrs. Kennedy and the president in the front seat of the car, in the back seat of the car. Mrs. Connally and Governor Connally, you cannot see behind Mrs. Connally. The assassin took dead aim. He got the president apparently with the first shot in the head, and then Governor Connally with the next two shots. As we reported to you, the New York Stock Exchange has closed as a nation. If these reports are true, prepares to go into mourning. The stock exchange closed after prices began tumbling as word spread rapidly through the floor of the exchange of this event in Dallas. All stock exchanges apparently are now closed. The New York Cotton and Wool exchanges, The American Stock Exchange, the coffee and sugar exchanges are closed. Recounting for you again the succession of events. In Dallas, Texas this morning, President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas shot as their motorcade proceeded from Dallas Airport to downtown Dallas, where the president was scheduled to make a speech. The assassin perhaps succeeded, word is that he did, in killing President Kennedy. The president taken to Parkland Hospital, where a moment ago 2 priests left the room and said they understood the president was dead. Our own reporter in Dallas also says that he has information that the president is dead. This official word has not come, however, from Parkland Hospital as yet. A Secret Service man was also killed in the fusillade of shots that came apparently from a second-story window. Now from Washington, government sources say that President Kennedy is dead. Those are government sources, still not an official announcement. But government sources in Washington, the priests who left the emergency room, our correspondent Dan Rather in Dallas, say that this is the information that the president is dead. A television newsman, Hal Luff, said that he looked up just after the shot was fired and saw a rifle being withdrawn from a 5th or 6th floor window of a nearby building. He said a policeman fell to the ground, pulled his pistol and yelled, "Get down," probably to attempt to return the shots. Earlier today, President Kennedy had been in Fort Worth, Texas. Yesterday he was in San Antonio. Today he was in Fort Worth this morning. He addressed a breakfast meeting, as did Mrs. Kennedy, of some 2,200 cheering people. Mrs. Kennedy, very attractive in a pale beige dress and a pillbox hat, had gotten a standing ovation from that crowd and had proved to be quite a campaigner in Texas in these last 2 days and was getting a lot of plaudits from the old political pros for that. President Kennedy himself rose rather early and went out into a parking lot near the hotel in Dallas, where he addressed informally a rather large crowd of people and had pleased them with his quips about the fact that he was sorry that he could not bring Mrs. Kennedy with him down to that particular meeting, but that it took her a little longer to get organized than it did him, but that, as he said, it's worth it. And the crowd laughed and applauded and enjoyed the quip. The president then went on to the breakfast meeting, and shortly thereafter his plane took off from Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth and flew him to his rendezvous with death, apparently, in Dallas, Texas. At the airport in Dallas, and throughout the streets of Dallas, the Dallas police had been augmented by some 400 policemen called in on their day off because there were some fears and concerns in Dallas that there might be demonstrations, at least, that could embarrass the president. Because it was only on October the 24th that our ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, was assaulted in Dallas, leaving a dinner meeting there. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon. President Kennedy at Dallas Airport this morning was cheerful and waving. It had been quite a triumphal tour of Texas over the last 48 hours. There were hundreds of people crowded around the president at the airport, wildly cheering. There had not been any outstanding demonstrations. Nothing like that, the demonstrations that greeted Adlai Stevenson, our UN ambassador in Dallas, as I was telling you a moment ago, on October the 24th, when a lot of banners saying, get out of the UN and coexistence is appeasement and that sort of thing, greeted him at a meeting. He was greeted by hecklers in the Dallas auditorium where he spoke, and then as he left the hall, a lady demonstrator there hit him over the head with one of her picket signs. He wasn't badly injured, but he was obviously shaken by the experience. The lady later said that she was pushed from behind, and that's why the sign fell and hurt Adlai Stevenson, or rather struck him. He wasn't badly hurt. As we told you a moment ago, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas today. He was shot in Dallas at 12:25 as his car proceeded through the crowded streets of Dallas. He died 35 minutes later in the Dallas Parkland Hospital. Governor John Connally of Texas was also shot by the assassin. The condition in which Governor Connally now is, we do not know as yet, but apparently he is conscious and has talked to an aide there. Vice President Johnson was in a following car and was apparently not hurt. He has left the hospital and has gone to an unknown destination where it is assumed he will shortly take the oath of office as the President of the United States.
Some pictures of the President this morning.
We have also, we're beginning to hear now from points around the world, of course, in a succession of messages that will be coming in. Dan Shore reports from Paris that, from Germany, that Prime Minister Erhard of Germany heard the news en route back to Bonn from Paris, and of course Dan Shore said, not knowing at the time that he cabled us a few minutes ago that the President was dead, said that Erhard would probably postpone his visit to Washington. It seems almost certain that that would be the case now. Here are some pictures taken of President Kennedy earlier today. Here is one from Fort Worth, where President Kennedy is shaking hands with a mounted member of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Posse. This was right after he made that outdoor speech that I told you about just a little while ago. And another picture of the President and Mrs. Kennedy at that Chamber of Commerce breakfast at Fort Worth, about which I was telling you. The President seems to be applauding Mrs. Kennedy, as he had been doing for 2 days, because she was making a big hit in Texas. Here he is greeting that crowd in the parking lot in Fort Worth, as I told you, before the Chamber of Commerce breakfast, the crowd to which he said he was sorry Mrs. Kennedy couldn't address or be with, but that it took her a little longer to get organized in the morning than it did him. But as he said, it's worth it. And here is a picture of the President also at that outdoor meeting this morning in a more formal pose. And here is Governor Connally of Texas, who was shot in the same assassination attempt. Lyndon Johnson, now the President of the United States, stands here in this group also. Apparently, the police are not convinced that they have the assassin, the young man who they are questioning. They have spread a giant dragnet around the city of Dallas, and they say that they're searching for a white man, about 30, of slender build, weighing about 165 pounds. They say that he apparently shot the President with a .30-30 rifle. That's a very high-powered and accurate rifle, which is a very popular rifle among the game hunters of Texas. Senator Yarborough of Texas said to have collapsed in sobs as he told reporters of the slaying of President Kennedy. Automatically, of course, the mantle of the presidency of the United States falls now to Vice President Johnson, a native Texan who was riding in the car behind the President, but perhaps because of the fact that the President's car had run just a little bit ahead, was not a target of the assassin also. The assassin, who apparently was a very good shot, shooting from a fifth or sixth floor window across the street, it is believed, so that his aim had to be over at least 100 feet, it would seem, perhaps more, drilled the president in the head and Connally in the chest. And if the vice president had been closer, perhaps he would have had time for a shot there too. We're going to keep you advised of details as they come in here to our news desk in New York. Let me recount for you this day's tragic developments so far. President Kennedy has been assassinated. He was shot in his open limousine as he proceeded from Dallas Airport to the downtown Dallas area for a scheduled speech. He was shot at about 12:25 Eastern Time today, and 35 minutes later died with head wounds in Parkland Hospital in Dallas. Governor John Connally of Texas, riding in the car with him, was also shot, but we do not have late details on his condition. Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally were in the automobile, the open limousine with the president, and with his wounds, she would cry, "Oh no," was speeded President Kennedy and Governor Connally. Blood was rushed to the hospital and transfused to save the president's life. The Catholic priests were called to the hospital and administered last rites to the president. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was in the motorcade in a car immediately following the president. He is in Dallas and presumably will take the oath of office as this nation's 36th president there in Dallas very shortly. The assassin, we do not know whether he has been caught or not. There is a dragnet out for a man, however, in Dallas who has been described as a white man, about 30. He apparently fired from the fifth or sixth floor window of a building on the motorcade route, firing almost directly down into the automobile carrying the president. President Kennedy is dead of an assassin's bullet in the 46th year of his life and in the third year of his administration as President of the United States. This is Walter Cronkite at our CBS newsroom in New York. And now if Charles Collingwood is standing by, Charles will sit in here to keep you advised of further details as this tragic day goes on. Charles?
The entire nation has been taken up with the tragedy of the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. We've told you all that we know of the confused events that transpired this morning and early afternoon in the rest of the nation. The president died about 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, according to the reports which we have had. That was about an hour after the assassin's bullet felled him while he was riding in the car through downtown Dallas, Texas, to go out to an engagement in part of his tour of Texas. You've heard the reports that Governor Connally was also wounded, though apparently not as seriously, and that Vice President Lyndon Johnson, who was in the motorcade, apparently not wounded, will soon be taking, at some undisclosed spot, the oath of office as the 37th President of the United States. Mrs. Kennedy, who was riding beside the President, into whose lap the President fell when he was shot, is still at the hospital. She was not harmed. The White House spokesman has refused to comment on her condition. Vice President Johnson was, of course, under heavy guard by the Secret Service officials who were with the presidential party. He went to the hospital and then was taken from there by White House officials to another spot in Dallas, Texas. The Secret Service has always known that it is impossible completely to protect the President of the United States on occasions such as this. There's always been the chance that any president might be killed in a crowded situation with windows overlooking the street in an open car, such as presidents of the United States customarily travel, trusting in the good faith of the fellow citizens of this country. President Kennedy, we are told, was shot in the right temple. And according to Dr. George Berkeley, the White House medical officer, the White House physician, it was a simple matter of a bullet right through the head. The shooting, as we have told you, occurred as President Kennedy and his wife, riding with Governor Connally of Texas and Mrs. Connally, were riding in the familiar White House bubble top, which is usually shipped from Washington, in which the president can ride, which is equipped with facilities for the Secret Service to ride along with him. Was shot in that open car as he drove through the crowd of approximately 250,000 people in downtown Dallas. As it neared a triple underpass, which leads out from the center of Dallas toward the Trade Mart where the president was to address a luncheon, there were several bursts of gunfire. Most of the witnesses agree that there were 3 clearly audible. And the president and Governor Connally of Texas slumped into the seats of the limousine. The new president, Lyndon Johnson, and Mrs. Johnson left the hospital where they went with the presidential party. Newsmen have had no opportunity to question them. The horror of the assassination was mirrored in an eyewitness account by Senator Ralph Yarborough, a Democrat of Texas, who had been riding 3 cars in the long motorcade behind President Kennedy. He told reporters, "You could tell that something awful and tragic had happened." Senator Yarborough's voice was breaking, his eyes red-rimmed, as he said, "I could see a Secret Service man in the president's car, leaning on the car with his hands in anguish, anger, and despair. I knew then," said Senator Yarborough, "that something tragic had happened." That was the way the news came, not only to those of us far away from Dallas, but to those in the presidential entourage itself. It happened so quickly, the cars were separated. It was not clear at first where the shots came from. That confusion resulted there and everywhere else, and there are still a great many loose ends to be tied up. The president apparently died 30 minutes, roughly, after the shot was fired. Governor Connally, who was wounded twice, apparently through the back, was reported in satisfactory condition. Presumably, the White House staff and President Johnson will go through some time in the next few minutes, if indeed it has not already happened, with the ceremonies of taking a formal oath of office to succeed the slain president. One reporter on the scene said that he saw a gun emerge from an upper story of a warehouse which commanded the presidential route through Dallas. John F. Kennedy was the first president to be assassinated since William McKinley was shot in 1901. It was the first death of a president in office since Franklin D. Roosevelt died of cerebral hemorrhage at Warm Springs, Georgia in April 1945. At that time, Vice President Truman was in Washington and was able to take the oath of office in the White House in a fairly short time. Undoubtedly, Vice President Johnson will succeed to the presidency through an oath of office in Dallas, Texas, this afternoon. Police have already spread a dragnet around the city searching for the assassin. The man being sought, yes?
Bob Trout is just taking a walk through Manhattan, reaction to people in the streets and things.
Come, Bob.
I want to put the mic between the two.
Yeah. Like most Americans, Bob Trout was caught unawares and went through this city of New York unawares by this. Bob, what did you see?
Well, I had heard, Charles, a few moments ago, and I just took a walk of almost a mile through Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue here in New York City. And it was curious, there's not a single shop closed. When Franklin Roosevelt died so suddenly, the shops, somehow the word got around, the shops closed, and there were pictures of Mr. Roosevelt in shop windows in Fifth Avenue draped in black. But I haven't seen a thing like that. No bank is closed. The post office is open here very close to this building in Lexington Avenue. And most people are going about their business as if they hadn't heard yet, but the automobile radios are blaring out. And when a car stops, people form little knots around it, when it stops for a red light. But the strange thing is that some people have heard, and about every other block or so, you see people weeping openly in the street. I saw one man leaning against a lamppost with a handkerchief pressed to his eyes. And in two churches nearby, one is St. Bartholomew's and Park Avenue, one St. Thomas and Fifth Avenue, people are streaming in, and most of them weeping as if they're going in to pray. The only church bell I heard is on the Catholic church quite close by on 43rd Street, which is now tolling, which is just outside this building, actually. It's very odd, about 9/10 of the city going about its business as if it doesn't quite know. And, oh yes, I passed a school building, and the school had just come out, and every school child was weeping. The girls, they had handkerchiefs, the boys were crying, everybody was weeping as he came, all the children. But most people seem as if they don't know, the ones that do, very, very deeply affected. Strange.
That's an experience which has been shared by something like 150 million people, isn't it? As the news came at this hour when people were having lunch or going about their ordinary affairs. We still have no fresher reports from Dallas of what is transpiring there. It is, as far as we know, official and without doubt that the President of the United States has been assassinated and is dead as the result of an assassin's bullet in Dallas, Texas. CBS News will stay on the air live from this newsroom in New York City throughout this day to keep you up to the minute on the latest developments in the assassination of the President. Vice President Johnson, who was with the presidential party, is expected to take the oath of office as the 37th President of the United States at any time this afternoon. The word, of course, has begun to spread throughout the world. In Rome, Cardinal Francis Spellman, there for the Ecumenical Council, said that he is shocked and grief-stricken to hear of President John Kennedy's death. As this afternoon goes on and as the word reaches leaders throughout the world, there will be many more messages of that kind. Governor Connolly, who was riding in the same car with the President and Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connolly, and who was also shot twice by bullets apparently from the same assassin, Governor Connolly is reported in serious condition and in great pain. The only words we have from him were those to an aide: "Take care of Nellie," Governor Connolly's wife. President Kennedy died apparently about half an hour after being wounded in his car driving from downtown Dallas toward the Trade Mart where he was to make an appearance. He was given the last rites by two priests of the Roman Catholic Church who came out of the ward, the emergency ward in the hospital at approximately 1:37 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the priests announced at that time to those who had gathered outside the hospital that the president was dead when they had seen him. And this brought audible sobs from the crowd, from scores of newsmen and White House aides who were gathered there. Senator Ralph Yarborough, a Democrat of Texas, who was in three cars behind the president, talking only a few minutes before the newsmen, had collapsed in sobs as he told told reporters of watching the slaying of the president. My colleague Eric Severide is here, and
Charles, while we're waiting for more details of the events in Dallas, it is obvious that all of us here, as well as the rest of the country, will have our thoughts about the president and his family and what must now happen in the next few days. And after that, we will obviously have to turn to, along with the rest of the world, the consideration of the man who will be the new president of this country. Mr. Kennedy was the first president born in this century. Mr. Lyndon Johnson will be the second. He's in his mid-50s. It is clear from the evidence of recent years that Mr. Johnson's health is very good in spite of that heart attack of some years ago, which he suffered outside Washington, and when for a while his vigor was considerably reduced. He is in perfectly good state of fitness now, so far as all his friends and doctors and everyone can testify. He is a man very much of Mr. Kennedy's persuasion on both domestic and foreign affairs. He is well traveled in this world, well acquainted with the leaders of the rest of the Western world. Mr. Kennedy, you know, was the new young force among world leaders, so much younger than those in France, in Britain, in Russia, or Germany. And Mr. Johnson will be still, I think, the youngest, except perhaps the new Chancellor of Germany. But on the whole, the older men of an older time will still be in power. I think you perhaps have a new bulletin there, Charles, and if that is important, I'm sure you want to go with it.
Well, Eric, the bulletin is that our correspondent in Dallas, Dan Rather, reports that the Dallas police have arrested a 30-year-old man who was found with a weapon in his possession. No other details are known at the moment, but a man has been arrested carrying a gun, and naturally the entire machinery of law and order in Dallas, both on the city, state, and federal level, have gone into action to try to apprehend the assassin and those who helped him. The bulletin is that a 30-year-old man has been arrested.
One might say at this point that it is very much to be hoped that this assassin, whoever he is not connected with any particular political group, a so-called hate group or otherwise. This will result in a very great rending of the political flesh of this country. The men who shot Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Theodore Roosevelt, who spoke for an hour with a bullet in his chest once, non-fatal, were all purely individuals of an erratic and perhaps insane type, as well as the man who tried to shoot President Franklin Roosevelt in Florida in 1933 and did kill Mayor Cermak of Chicago at that time. We can hope at this point that this person, whoever he is of a similar stripe, and that there were no coherent political motivations or connections with this man. Otherwise, I think it's going to be very rough, don't you?
Unquestionably, this is going to have an absolutely imponderable effect upon the political situation and upon the public attitude toward the causes in which the president was interested. In a sense, President Kennedy's assassination came out of the same venomous and supercharged attitudes that brought about the assassination of President Lincoln. Like that of President Lincoln, it was based on, perhaps at least, upon a racial issue. We have a bulletin from Texas now, which has to do with Governor John Connally, who was wounded riding in the same car. Governor John Connally has undergone an operation for the gunshot wounds in his chest. His condition is said to be serious, but his doctor said that his vital signs are good. A doctor said that Connally had a good pulse and that his respiration is satisfactory. When the president died, 6 members of his cabinet were out of the country, flying to Japan. An hour and a half out of Honolulu, the secretaries were advised of the killing and immediately turned back. They were expected to speed back to Washington. The party, containing so many members of the cabinet, were on their way to a meeting with members of the Japanese cabinet. In the party were Secretary of State Dean Rusk, the Secretary of Commerce Luther Hodges, Secretary of Labor Wirtz, Secretary of the Interior Udall, and Secretary of Agriculture Freeman with their wives. As they were over the Pacific on their way to Honolulu, as a way stop on their way to Japan, the cabinet mission turned back to come back to Washington to face the situation, the fresh situation caused by the death of the president. The entire world, of course, has been stunned by the president's assassination. The American Armed Forces Network in Europe made direct transmissions from Washington announcing the president's death to American servicemen and their families in Europe, for whom, of course, the president is commander-in-chief. In the Vatican, Pope Paul was immediately informed. News of the murder was received with dismay at the North American College in Rome, where the vice rector, Monsignor Chambers, said that he would inform the American cardinals and prelates who were dining at the moment. There's a 6-hour time difference between this country and Rome. The Soviet news agency TASS carried the news as a flash on its international English language radio teletype circuit at 2:45 or 2:48 this afternoon. And this is what TASS, the Russian news service, said. It has just been officially announced that the United States President, John F. Kennedy, has died in hospital after an attempt was made on his life by persons, as believed, from among the extreme right-wing elements. Of course, we have no knowledge of the political motivations, or indeed the other motivations, of the person or persons who fired upon the president. We do have a report from Dallas, from our correspondent there, CBS News correspondent Dan Rather, that Dallas police have arrested a 30-year-old man who was found with a weapon in his possession. The shot was apparently fired from a warehouse building, a building which housed large numbers of school textbooks, which overlooked the route which the presidential motorcade followed on its way from downtown Texas to the Trade Mart where the president was to speak. The reports continue to come in, but in a confused and fragmentary fashion. No one, however well prepared the Secret Service and the presidential organization may be, no one was prepared for this. It happened quickly in the midst of a large crowd of 250,000 people, and we are bringing you the reports as they come into us here in New York just as quickly as we can. And of course, CBS News will stay on the air, live throughout this day to keep you informed on the up-to-the-minute developments in the assassination of the president. Already, parallels are being drawn between other assassinations and sudden deaths of American presidents in office. The last president to die in office was President Franklin Roosevelt, who was succeeded by Vice President Truman, as President Kennedy will be succeeded by Vice President Johnson. Looking back on the confused events of this morning, the President, Mrs. Kennedy, Vice President Johnson were on a tour of Texas. They had a large number of engagements to fulfill. They were greeted at the airport with every evidence of enthusiasm. Mrs. Kennedy making one of her comparatively rare trips with the President on a political errand. She, according to all accounts, had won everyone's heart, although President Kennedy was greeted with some banners and some Confederate flags flying. Every observer who watched it felt that his arrival and his reception in Texas was a warm and friendly one. As he followed his schedule in a long motorcade of cars with officials and with reporters following them, they drove from downtown Texas to a trade mart where there was a large luncheon arranged and where he and Mrs. Kennedy were to make an appearance. As they left downtown Texas, going toward an underpass, which is a landmark in Dallas, where three roads come together and go underneath the railroad, shots rang out, apparently from a building, a warehouse, overlooking the route of the parade. Those in the cars behind saw that the presidential car stopped. President Kennedy fell with his head in his wife's lap. Mrs. Kennedy said, "Oh no." The governor of Texas, Governor Connolly, slumped to the floor with bullet wounds in the back and apparently in the chest. There was a brief pause, then the cars rushed the wounded men to the Parkdale Hospital. The president was taken to the emergency ward, and as the minutes ticked by, two Catholic priests came in. There were rumors that he had died. There were rumors that the wound was not so serious. Blood was brought for transfusions. When the two Catholic priests came out. They said the president was dead. This was later confirmed. Governor Connolly is in serious condition. He's undergone an operation for his gunshot wound, but the doctors say that his vital signs are good. Vice President Johnson, who was not wounded, went to the hospital, as did Mrs. Johnson, and was then, after half an hour, taken away, or went off with the Secret Service men, who are now as anxious to protect his life as they had been that of President Kennedy, and he will doubtless take the oath of office as the nation's 37th president in a short time. All over the world, there have been expressions of shock and grief. From Rome, where the Ecumenical Council is going on, the American Cardinal Spellman, has expressed his great grief. The message has been carried to Russia by TASS. The European nations have been informed. Now, in our own capital, where much of the cabinet was away on a trip to Japan, their plane has turned back over the Pacific to bring them back. Let us switch now to Washington for a report on the mood in the nation's capital. Neil Strasser reporting.
Washington was, of course, hit like a thunderbolt by news of the assassination attempt, even before news of the president's death came to this capital. The first comments were, "Oh God, how terrible," on Capitol Hill. Senator Edward Kennedy, the president's brother, was presiding over the Senate today when first word came the president had been shot. An aide informed him, and he rushed from the Senate chamber. Senator Kennedy was signing some autographs, we're told. At the time the aide came up to him, the autographs flew all over the place when he got the word. Other senators in the chamber looked up, disturbed by the intrusion of the aide. When that same aide circulated quietly to them, they too went away dazed, saying very little. Some of the comments on the first news of the shooting, Senator Richard Russell of Georgia said the whole nation is shocked by this dastardly crime. Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois said, "Oh God, this is the most distressing thing that could ever happen. I am shocked." Senator Mike Mansfield, the Democratic leader of the Senate, "This is terrible. I can't find words." And a statement from Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia on the president's death, "I am deeply shocked. The assassination of President Kennedy is a disaster to this nation and the free world. I cannot find words to express my personal distress." A statement from Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia. Members of both houses, after news of the shooting came, walked around dazed as they tried to pick up details. Telephone switchboards at both the Congress and the White House were tied in knots. Those few remaining members of the official White House staff clustered around television sets. Mr. Kennedy's special assistant, Ted Sorensen, watched silently, left the room when reporters asked quietly if he had any comment. The president's other brother here in Washington, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, was having lunch at home when word of his brother's shooting reached him. A quick check with the Justice Department discloses that there is nothing in the law that prescribes when or how Vice President Johnson shall take the oath of office or who shall give it to him. The Constitution states only that he shall take the oath of office for the presidency before entering on the duties of the office. As you will recall, Calvin Coolidge was at his home in Plymouth, Vermont in August of 1923 when word came of the death of President Harding. Coolidge was immediately administered the oath of office by his own father, a justice of the peace. Later, the ceremony was performed again in Washington by a justice of the then Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. President Truman was in Washington when word came of the death of Franklin Roosevelt in 1945 and was given the oath in private at the White House by, I believe, a Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So that is the way Washington is taking the news of President Kennedy's death. Many of these statements simply say, "I cannot find words to express my shock or sorrow." We'll have more. This is Neil Strasser in Washington.
CBS News, of course, will stay on the air live throughout this day to keep you up to the minute on the latest developments in the assassination of the president and in the inevitable aftermath that will follow it. Mrs. Kennedy was with the president in the same car. She was not hurt. The president's mother and father were told that the president was shot by a workman in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, where they are. The report came to them before it was known that the president had been killed. Reports were that neither the president's father, former Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy, nor the president's mother had any comment to make when told of the shooting. The president's father is now a semi-invalid as the result of a stroke a few years ago, and he was napping when the word came. The president and Mrs. Kennedy had planned to spend Thanksgiving holiday at Hyannisport next week. We will have a live switch to the United Nations, video only, Adlai Stevenson at the UN accepting condolences. There is no sound to this, but the United Nations, like other institutions, is adjourning its deliberations to pay honor to the President of the United States. Pope Paul in Rome has been informed of the President's death. Cardinal Spellman, there in Rome for the Ecumenical Council, his voice shaking with emotion, said, "I am saying the rosary for him now." The Cardinal said that President Kennedy's death, President Kennedy, of course, a fellow co-religionist of Cardinal Spellman, the Cardinal said it was a great loss to the country and to the world. Cardinal James McIntyre of Los Angeles and Cardinal Ritter of St. Louis called together the student priests of Rome's North American College to recite prayers for Kennedy. Cardinal McIntyre said that Cardinal Ritter and myself were having dinner there in Rome. It's dinner time there because of the time difference. When they heard the astounding news of the President's death, we are shocked, grief-stricken, our hearts are pained. West German Chancellor Ludwig Erhard, who was to have visited President Kennedy on Sunday, was informed of the President's death while on the way back to Bonn from Paris. "The news fills the German people with deep grief," said Chancellor Erhard. All those who had the fortunate opportunity to make the personal acquaintance of President Kennedy, in particular the people of Berlin, where of course the President had recently visited, are deeply grieved in this hour. The Premier Designate of Italy, Aldo Moro, said his stature as a politician in his great country and on the international scene was growing in these years of a courageous policy of renewal. The reason for which he was struck in a mad way raises President Kennedy even more on the moral plane as a great defender of man's dignity and equality, said the Italian Premier Designate in Rome. French Premier Georges Pompidou exclaimed, "It is atrocious, it is frightful, I am overwhelmed." In Madrid, a Foreign Office spokesman said, "It is horrible, absolutely horrible, a most barbarous thing. Everyone here is horrified." And thus, international differences, disputes, are swept away in the moment of shocked, stunned grief. The Italian news agency TASS, in reporting on its wires to its subscribers the death of the president, asserted that he had been killed by a right-wing American extremist. There is no confirmation of that. A man has been arrested in Dallas, a 30-year-old white man who was carrying a gun. We know nothing of his political persuasion. But Dallas, Texas is considered a center of conservative philosophy and finance. It was on October 24th that Adlai Stevenson, our ambassador to the United Nations, whom you saw a moment ago receiving condolences of representatives of other countries to the United Nations, that Adlai Stevenson, making an appearance on United Nations Day in Dallas, was spat upon by one heckler and struck with a placard by another. It was believed that the strong emotions which run in Texas and other parts of the South may have been part of the context of attitudes which resulted in the tragic occurrence today. It was believed that the president's body will be moved shortly to Washington. Traditionally, funeral services for presidents who die in office are held in the Capitol. A presidential spokesman, the White House spokesman, told newsmen that Governor Connally, who had been riding in the same open limousine with the president, had been wounded in the right chest. Connally was rushed into surgery in the hospital for a 2-hour emergency operation. He is said to be in serious condition, but the doctors say that his vital forces are strong. A lieutenant of the Secret Service, Lieutenant Kaminsky, said that the assassin's weapon appears to have been a high-powered Army or Japanese rifle of about 25 caliber. The rifle had a scope sight on it, according to the Secret Service lieutenant. The entire building where the sniper was located was evacuated, and people working in the building at the time of the shooting were questioned. This morning, President Kennedy had telephoned Vice President John Nance Garner, who had been Roosevelt's vice president, as you remember, congratulating him on his 95th birthday, where former Vice President Garner lives in Uvalde, Texas. And according to this report, Garner's end of the conversation went this way: "God bless you, Mr. President. You're my president, and I love you. I hope you stay there forever. Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you." The words of former Vice President John Nance Garner, 95 years old, in Texas this morning, one of the last telephone calls that President Kennedy apparently made. This is what we know of the assassination as it took place this morning. President Kennedy was traveling in a motorcade through the streets of Dallas before a generally enthusiastic crowd, in some places a conspicuously enthusiastic crowd, of 250,000 people. With Mr. Kennedy in the open limousine, the White House bubble top, which is so familiar to those who have seen the president on television or in person as he travels throughout the country. With the president were Governor John Connally of Texas, Mrs. Kennedy, and Mrs. Connally. Suddenly there were shots. An eyewitness said that he saw them fired from a window in a warehouse building overlooking the route from downtown Dallas out to the Trade Mart where the president was to appear. Bullets hit Mr. Kennedy in the forehead, and Governor Connally in the chest. The two men were seen to slump into their wives' arms. Neither Mrs. Kennedy nor Mrs. Connally were hurt. One report has said, still not confirmed, that one of the Secret Service men accompanying and guarding the president was killed by the gunfire. Then, convoyed by police, the limousine raced off at top speed to Parkland Hospital, which was 5 minutes away. Meanwhile, police and Secret Service agents moved in on the assassin, searched the building, and an arrest of one man armed with a rifle is reported. The president and the governor were taken to the hospital's emergency room. The president was not moved from there and died there. The governor was moved to an operating room, and after an operation is reported in serious condition, but the doctors appear to be hopeful. Dallas motorcycle officers who were ranging along beside the cavalcade took off across a field in the direction from which the murderer apparently had fired. One officer raced to the foot of a nearby railroad embankment and climbed to the tracks above, gun in hand. No one knew quite where the shots had been fired for quite a long while. Apparently they were fired from a building and not from one of the knolls which rose above the road. White House Acting Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff said that the president's body will be flown to Washington this afternoon. The Dallas Sheriff's Department said a rifle had been found on a staircase on the 5th floor of the building near the scene where it is now believed from where the shots were fired. It was a 7.65 Mauser, German rifle, familiar to those who served in World War II. The German-made Army rifle had a telescopic sight. One shell was left in the chamber. 3 spent shells were found nearby. Most of the witnesses, most of those who were in the cavalcade, as they attempt to recollect the sudden and confused events which took place, say that they heard 3 shots, which checks with the fact that 3 shots had been fired, one still found in the Mauser with which the assassin was apparently armed. Democratic Senator from Texas, Ralph Yarborough, who, like most other Texas politicians these days, have been engaged in hot political infighting there, was riding 3 cars behind President Kennedy, and he told newsmen in a choked and emotional interview that you could tell that something awful and tragic had happened. Senator Yarborough said, "I could see a Secret Service man in the president's car, leaning on the car with his hands in anger, anguish, and despair. I knew then," said Senator Yarborough, "that something tragic had happened." We continue to get reports from foreign countries, as the word reaches the chiefs of state and simple people in other countries of the death of the American president, as always happens on these occasions, shock is the dominating note of the reports from abroad. We learned from Washington that Mrs. Sargent Shriver, the sister of the president, has been taken by helicopter from the White House to Andrews Air Force Base, presumably to fly to Dallas to join Mrs. Kennedy, or perhaps to await there the return of the party from Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy, who was riding in the same car with the president, was not hurt, but has been taken to a quiet room in the hospital at this moment, after the aftermath of the terrible moment that she had to go through, in which the shot rang out and the president slumped down, his head in her lap. Reports are still coming in. They do not perhaps add a great deal to the confusion of the events that we have been trying to sort out all day. But as they come into us, CBS News is going to stay on the air live from here throughout this day in order to keep you up to date on the latest developments in the assassination of the president and what happens next. The news agencies and our own correspondents who are keeping us informed from Dallas continue to send us reports bringing together the various pieces of information, some confirmed, some unconfirmed, as they come in and as we begin to sort out the truth from the rumors of what has happened. The president's body has now been removed from Parkland Hospital. It was taken from there shortly after his death in a long cream-colored ambulance with the curtains tightly drawn. Mrs. Kennedy rode from the hospital in a passenger seat in the ambulance, which is a type of vehicle that does have 2 seats for passengers. She and the body of President Kennedy were escorted from the emergency entrance of the Parkland Hospital by 2 motorcycle officers. Mrs. Kennedy walked slowly from the hospital to the ambulance, looking around her, we are told, in a dazed manner, and appeared to be in a state of shock. Those who saw her enter the hospital an hour and a half earlier said that she had not been hysterical and remained in control of herself throughout. Secret Service men have directed police to remove spectators from the whole area. And now we have another report from Washington. Neil Strasser reporting.
3 jet planes are now warming up at Andrews Air Force Base, presumably to fly members of the president's family to Dallas, Texas. As you've already heard, Eunice Shriver, the president's sister, has left the White House by helicopter, along with the president's aide and very good friend, Theodore Sorensen, presumably on the way to Andrews Air Force Base. Comments coming in from Capitol Hill are uniform in sorrow and very much bipartisan. Democratic Senate Leader Mike Mansfield told newsmen the death was a deep, personal, and tragic loss. Seated with Republican Senate Leader Everett Dirksen in Mansfield offices off the floor of the Senate chamber, the Democratic leader told assembled reporters simply, he was a man who contributed so much and deserved so much more in return. Senator Alan Bible, Democrat of Nevada, said this is one of the great tragedies of our civilization. The world has lost a great champion, and the United States has lost a great and courageous president. Senator Jordan, Democrat of North Carolina, said the assassination was a great tragedy that has befallen this nation. The Speaker of the House and the next man in line for the presidency after Lyndon Johnson, Speaker McCormick, issued this statement to reporters, "This is a tragic event. I feel very inadequate in expressing my thoughts. The nation," said Speaker McCormick, "has sustained a staggering loss, the significance of which is stupendous. Our country and the entire world will never forget President Kennedy. His leadership was superb in meeting the challenge of this period of world history. The warmth of his personality will never be forgotten. The relationship that has existed between the President and myself throughout the years has been very close and most friendly. In his tragic passing, I have lost a dear and personal friend. The statement of Speaker McCormick. We are told that an aide of Vice President Lyndon Johnson, now President Johnson, George Reedy, has arrived at the White House. There can be very little delay in these times, of course, to have a new administration take over. As we told you, the law says that the oath of office can be given by almost anyone. By now, Johnson could already have taken it. It is presumed he will take it very shortly.